Welcome back to NBCLX. I'm Jo Beth DeVera. A new study from the University of Cambridge finds young people who are victims of bullying are more likely to daydream about hurting or even killing others. The study tracked around 1,400 students across the Swiss city of Zurich at the ages of 15, 17, and 20, and they used quizzes to find levels of aggressiveness and even who the young people thought about hurting. Boys were more likely to have violent thoughts, but the data was similar in both boys and girls. Researchers also found that the most extreme thoughts decreased by the age of 20, but the effects of victimization on violent fantasies did not. And this suggests that the intensity of the psychological trauma may impact adults in the same way. So joining us now to dive deeper into this study is psychiatrist Carole Lieberman. Thanks for being with us today, Carole. First, I want to ask, why is a study like this so important to do?
Well, it is important to try to figure out what is causing people to have violent thoughts, because the idea behind the study is that violent thoughts may well result in violent actions later on or at that age. I mean, what they showed was that the more acts of aggression that the child suffered, or it was teenagers from 17 to 20 for the most part, the more acts of aggression that they suffered throughout their life, the more likely they were to have acts of aggression themselves, or to at least have thoughts of acts of aggression. Now, that is where the study stops. They have not really proven that these thoughts of aggression, and the percentages were really pretty alarming. For example, 17-year-old boys who hadn't been bullied in the past year, the probability of their having violent fantasies over the last month was 56%. These are kids who weren't bullied, but with each type of mistreatment, the percentage of their violent fantasies increased. And so that if they listed 10 different types of mistreatment, they had a 97% chance of having violent fantasies. Now, that's a pretty scary number. The psychology behind this is that it's called identification with the aggressor. Now, what that means is that whether children are bullied in a sense by their parents, in other words, they have abusive parents, or whether they're bullied by a kid in school, or also they looked at sexual violence, being pressured into having sex, for example. Whatever it is that they were bullied into, when they grow up, they are more likely to want to be, they feel they want power back. So when they were young, and if they had this kind of bullying, any type of aggression towards them, they unconsciously are thinking to themselves, well, when I grow up, I am going to be the bully. I am going to be the one with the power, not so much the bully, but the one with the power. And so that is why, indeed, it is true. I mean, we sort of really knew this, that children who are bullied or who experience, especially, the study needs to put more prominently the impact of abusive parenting. I mean, yes, of course, if a child is bullied in school, they are ultimately identified with that aggressor, but it is particularly damaging when you have abusive parents.
So obviously there probably is no easy answer to this, but what do you think the solution is? How do we stop these kids from having these violent thoughts and then carry them on into adulthood?
Well, the trick, the solution is, first of all, to identify them early. First of all, the solution is to start by educating parents. This whole spare the rod and spoil the child is really not correct. You shouldn't be even spankings. Parents who say, well, I don't abuse my child, I just spank them when they're, doing something naughty. That is physically conveying, causing them to absorb physically, and of course psychologically, the violence, and that imbues them with this violence. The other thing that they didn't emphasize enough was the impact, and perhaps in Switzerland it isn't as much of an impact as in the United States, but certainly we know that violent media does have a very powerful, it did show the study did show that, but I think that and the parenting
Right.
needed to be emphasized a little more.
Yeah, I did go through the study. There was some questions that still needed to be answered, but overall, an interesting topic nonetheless. And I'm sure bullying and violent thoughts is something that we need to consider and always think about moving forward as well. But Carole Lieberman, that's all the time we
In
have
therapy,
today.
I mean, let me just add this.
We have to go to
To
break
be
in a minute. We can take you back
okay,
right after the break. Thank you so much, Carole. We'll be
sure.
right back.